there, welcome to Hayden Cooks a Lot. Tonight for dinner, I'm going to be making some crispy chicken thighs, and they are delicious. So what I have done before I started this, I made sure that if I had long sleeves, they were rolled up, my hair is pulled back, nothing on my hands like rings, watches, and stuff, and I wash my hands really well. I am preheating my oven. I have it on bake and then 400 degrees, and it still says preheating right here. My oven rack is in the center of my oven. You always bake in them right in the middle of your oven unless the recipe tells you a higher rack or a lower rack. So I have a baking sheet, and a baking sheet has all four sides on it. Do not do this on a cookie sheet. And then I took parchment paper. And I get my parchment paper, it comes in, and it just said, hello, I'm ready. It comes in a package of 2 at Costco, and that's the cheapest place to get it. These are large rolls. I love to use parchment paper when I'm cooking and sometimes baking too. It's a paper that helps things not to stick to the bottom. You just don't want to use this if you're going to be broiling something, because this can catch on fire. So anyway, I lined this. And I bought a large package at, let me see, where did I go? Food Lion the other day. And it's chicken thighs with the bone, with the skin. And they are the cheapest way to buy that way. And I got the big package, and it was like $5.60. All the grocery stores sell it. And some of you may want to wash your chicken. The CDC does not recommend washing meats. So washing chicken, you are at risk of getting foodborne illness, because when you wash it, as you go to wash each piece of chicken down in your sink, you have the water that's splashing out, little bits of water that goes all over your counter, all over your soap dispenser, on your faucet, on your clothes. On the floor. It goes everywhere. You just don't see it, okay? It's all over the inside of your sink. It's on everything in about a 6-foot area. So I have shown my students with that, what was that, black light thing with the little germ powder thing, and then when after they were done washing their hands, learning how to do that, and then we look with the black light around the counter and the sink, they're mortified because they thought that, oh, it didn't splashing over just in the sink. No, it is all over the place. So the CDC recommends, you can look it up yourself if you don't believe me, not to wash chicken and other meats, because the salmonella and the campylobacter spreads around, and that's usually how most people end up getting sick, is because they're touching the stuff after the fact, not realizing they've contaminated their surfaces, and then, you know, they go to eat a bag of chips or they do something or other, and then they end up eating that bacteria. So the only thing I'm going to put on this chicken is just salt. So you can use regular table salt, you can use kosher salt. I'm going to use Himalayan pink salt, and I buy this at Costco, and it already has a little grinder on the top of it. What's going to happen is the bones in the chicken are going to help to flavor the meat. And the skin on top of the chicken is going to crisp really good, and then it's going to add flavor to the chicken, and the salt on it is going to make the flavor just delicious. You do not need to brush this with oil, because as the skin cooks, it's going to release some of its own grease as it turns crispy. So I'm going to do a good amount of salt on the chicken for flavor. So let me get in here a little bit better. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm doing several cranks on each piece of chicken. And I don't go all the way around in a circle. You can see I just kind of go back and forth with my salt grinder. The little plastic wrapper that's still on it's a little bit sharp, so I'm being careful. And I didn't want to take the wrapper all the way off, because then the label would be off of it, so then you couldn't see what it looks like. All right, so good amount of salt on there. Put the lid back on, and that's it. When it's done in the oven, then I'm going to put a little bit of fresh ground black pepper on it. But that's just what I like it. It will crisp up. You will think this is delicious. It'll be extremely tender. Now, don't do the same thing with the chicken breasts and other items like that, the wings and legs. The thigh is the one that gets really crispy because this is going to bake a long time until it gets really browned, and you'll see what I mean when I take it out. But if you were to bake a chicken breast or something like that, as long as I'm going to be doing the thighs, it would dry out. So, all right, I'm going to get my oven mitts on. So, oven mitts always should be used, not a towel, not a pot holder when you go to put stuff in and out of the oven, so you don't end up burning your arms or using something where heat could come through onto your hand when you're pulling something out of the oven. So the oven is ready. I'm going to open the door all the way down so I don't bump it with my body and have the door close on my arms and burn myself. And I'm going to pick up the chicken and 2 hands, and then I'm going to be putting it right in the middle of the oven, sliding it in, close the door. And I'm going to set the timer for 30 minutes and then check it and then see how much longer I think it needs to bake. And with my oven timer, I don't need to hit a start button. Some of you might need to hit a start button to get it going. And I will have the oven light on so I can watch what's going on in there while I'm doing other things around the kitchen. And then when it comes out, I will show you how to use your instant read thermometer to double check that your chicken is done all the way. The thermometer, if you calibrate yours, it would be 165 for poultry. Poultry means bird. So 165, that's what the restaurants use. But a lot of people at home, they don't know how to calibrate their instant read thermometers. So it's recommended that you go to 170. Now, mine is calibrated. So to calibrate this, to know if your thermometer is working correctly, you take a glass and you put ice in it and you put water in it. And then you're going to stick the probe of this down into the ice water and keep this part out of the water, and you're going to read your thermometer. And your thermometer should read, after a few minutes, make sure you have good icy water, it should read 32 degrees. If it's reading 32 degrees, then your thermometer is working correctly. And then that means 165 for your chicken, okay? Otherwise, every single time you drop this thing, it could change how it reads the temperature. Chefs at restaurants, they have to calibrate their thermometers when they come on shift, and every time that they drop it, there's a little nut on the bottom of it right here. You see that? And then they would there's a little tool, and they would turn it until it reads the 32 degrees. You could also do the same thing, holding this with tongs, and then putting the probe into boiling water, okay? And then it would have to read 212 degrees here in the Raleigh area, 212. And that would also tell you if this is working correctly. All right, and I'll come back when it's about time to take the meat out of the oven and show you. All right, so the oven timer just went off. It's been in there for 30 minutes. So we'll see what it looks like. I know it's not done, but we'll see what it looks like. Door all the way down. Pull this out and set it on my hot pads. Close the door. Okay, so what you can see here is the chicken is starting to release its juices. It's starting to turn a little bit tan. We want this to go golden brown, okay? So you're gonna think you're overcooking it. You're not, okay? This is gonna stay really, really juicy when it's done. So I'm going to put it in for another, I'm gonna go about 15, 20 minutes, probably closer to 20, and then we're gonna check again. All right, so I'm gonna put it back in. Door all the way down. 2 hands using oven mitts, and very carefully get it back in there, right in the middle. Close the door, and then I'm gonna set my timer again, and we'll be back. All right, so my chicken thighs just came out of the oven. They're a nice, warm, golden brown. The skin on them has crisped up. I can see the little bit of salt going across the top of them. Looks really, really good. The paper does turn a little bit brown. You can see that in the camera. Yeah, you can see it. All right, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. You can let this cool down a little bit. When you take meat out of the oven or meat when you're done cooking it, you always need to let it rest a little bit because the juices kind of like flow out. And then when you let it rest, the juices are like, well, before you let it rest, the juices are moving around and that muscle tissue and stuff, and they will flow right out if you cut into it. So you got to let it sit for a few minutes so then the juices will go and they get sucked right back into that muscle tissue, so and it keeps it nice and juicy for you. So I have here a plate of some lettuce greens here, and I'm going to grab off one of these thighs right here, and there we go. Put that on there. I'm going to show you up close. There you go. It's nice and juicy and tender. So I took these out a couple minutes ago, and put a little bit of black pepper on it. This is a fresh ground black pepper. There we go. And I like to keep it in a little dish because it makes a mess that can fall inside of my kitchen cabinet. I don't like that. So let me show you this. So the skin gets super, super crispy. Remember, I know that this is done, but if you want to use your instant read thermometer, you would stick this into the meat so it goes up to about right here. Can you see that? Yeah, about right there. And you need to make sure that it reads at your house 170 if you don't calibrate, or 165 if you do calibrate your thermometer. Just make sure that this probe is not hitting a pocket of fat when it's not touching the bone that's in there. So you kind of like want to put it in and wiggle around just slightly, making sure you're not hitting anything. And then you wait 15 seconds and then see what it reads. And it has to hold that temperature for 15 seconds too to make sure you're reading it correctly. So this chicken thigh, you can see here, I can actually pull off the whole piece of skin. It's super crispy. Listen, you hear that? Yummy. And then inside here, we have this super tender, juicy meat. It's just like wants to fall apart. It is heaven. The crispy skin is delicious to eat too. So this ended up baking at 400 degrees, and I ended up, I didn't turn the video back on in between. I just ended up adding more time. So it actually was in the oven for a full hour, so 60 minutes of baking time. It could go another 10 minutes, which would be fine to give it even more deep golden brown. It's not going to be overdone inside. And you can, again, only bake it this long if you're doing chicken thighs, okay? So these will stay tender because this is a dark meat. And with that skin on there helps to protect it and keep it nice and juicy inside. So have I done this with skinless? Yes, but if I do skinless, then I brush on some oil on the top of it, and then I sprinkle on my salt before I put it into the oven, because you need a little bit of that fat. Otherwise, the outside of that skin gets really dry. But yeah, that's also really, really good. So anyway, I'm gonna take a little bite of this right here. It is pretty hot still. Delicious. Well, thanks for joining me. I'm gonna go eat my dinner.